folks, I'm Matt, and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. This morning's article in the Daily Mail detailing a super secret CIA program called the Office of Global Access and its involvement in running operations to recover crashed UAPs, otherwise known as UFOs, was nothing short of a bombshell. Utilizing Special Forces operators from the Joint Special Operations Command or Special Forces operators hired by private contractors to recover these off-world vehicles raises serious questions about how a democracy can survive without proper oversight. I was fortunate to be one of the 3 journalists who brought you this story in the Daily Mail, and joining us to discuss this article are my co-authors Josh Boswell and Christopher Sharp. Guys, how are you doing? This was one hell of a story. Josh, Chris, thanks for joining us. And I tell you, this has been an interesting journey, a bit of a long journey. Chris, if you wouldn't mind, walk us through it. How this story actually came about.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you for having me, and thank you both for really kind of working together on the story and helping putting this together, basically. So I started during the summer, and I just started getting interested in how a potential crash retrieval operation involving a potential non-human craft or craft of unknown origin might actually work. What would be the actual details? Who would go out to get it? How would they get access to it? What would they do with the radiological materials and all this stuff? So I started making inquiries and doing my own background research. I started thinking, well, actually, if it involves radiological material, then it would be the DOE, so the Department of Energy, that might be involved. So I contacted the NNSA to try to get more details into how that aspect could potentially work. So NNSA is National Nuclear Security Administration, and basically under it is the Nuclear Emergency Support Team. So they would be kind of like your response team should there be radiological material that might be a risk or something like that. And it's made up of engineers and scientists. So I thought, well, let's try to get them on the record. Have they ever come across or handled anything of unknown origin or non-human origin? I started asking the questions, getting them on record. I mean, they confirmed that they work with materials of unknown origin all the time. It's part of their job, basically. However, they did also confirm that we've not ever found any of this material to be of non-human origin. So I thought, well, that's great. I mean, that potentially rules them out. We've got them on the record. Let's dive into this some more. So then I started doing some other research and talking to sources, and JSOC came up a few times. So that's Joint Special Operations Command. So again, I thought, okay, let's get them on record then. And they came back to me just saying, I have nothing for you. When I asked them if they had ever if they had ever kind of like worked on operations in relation to materials of unknown origin. So I thought, okay, well, that's quite interesting. And they have nothing for me. And I followed up with that. And I said, look, is that a denial? Can I count that as a denial? And they didn't come back to me. So I thought, well, okay, that's quite a strange answer. Obviously it could mean anything. So it doesn't mean that they do have these kinds of materials that they've encountered. It could just mean that go away, we don't want to deal with the journalists. So I would stress that.
Right.
And then I guess just to finish off, I was doing some research as well about the Office of Global Access within the CIA's Science and Technology Directorate. The name had come up a few times, so I did some research into it, and I guess what I needed more meat to the bone, and that's where you came into the equation, Matt. We started speaking to some sources, getting corroboration, And we started this big process of trying to find what the details might be, and if there was anything behind these potential claims.
Yeah, and I was very excited because you had approached me about this story, and a lot of it was completely new to me. And of course, I thought, what can I do to help? So I brought my sources to bear, my relationships, and I think at some point you and I reached a point where, of course, we originally had spoken about this being in the Liberation Times and the great work you've done in the Liberation Times, but I think we kind of reached a point where we decided, this is a really big story, and this deserved to go into a much larger publication. And immediately the thought of the Daily Mail came up, and Josh, of course, you've done a lot of really great work in this space. So when we reached out to you, Josh, what was and kind of told you what we were coming across, what was your reaction to it? What were you thinking? Are these guys nuts, or were you in complete shock over what information we were bringing to bear?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, when you're doing these stories about, UAP, UFOs, there's always that part of you that's still there thinking, and I still get this every time. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. This is astounding. What Right. are we really talking about here? We're talking about non-human craft that have crashed or landed and have been picked up by the CIA, or at least in an operation that's organized by the CIA, and then are being hidden somewhere, and our government is keeping that from us. I mean, that is wild, and these are claims that have been put out there already, by David Grush, for example. The broad idea that the government has these, crashed craft hidden somewhere. But I thought it was a really great idea to try and pin down what the details of that were, as Chris was sort of explaining there. If this is true, that the government has these entities, these crashed craft sources, whatever you want to call them, then there must have been a process for them to collect those, and there must have been a process for them to then hand them off to whoever's got them now. And if we're going to find out more about it, we need to follow that paper trail. And so this story is really trying to dig into that. I thought that you had some, a great start with the indications that you had from your sources, the information that they gave you. And, I thought it needed some more to really firm it up. And so, I've got my own sources in this area. And I thought the three of us together might be able to crack it. And I think that we've got enough here to at least, make a first step to show readers, hey, look, this is what we're being told by people who are in a position to know. Let's put it out there. Let's get the ball rolling and see what happens.
Josh, I definitely would say you turned the amp up to level 11 and took this to a really great place. And I'm sure I can speak for Chris as well. We're both very, very appreciative of that. So, Josh, if you don't mind, walk us through the story.
All right. So we have, what we can be pretty sure about is three solid sources who've been briefed by people who were involved in these programs, that we have a wing of the CIA, and it's an office called the Office of Global Access, that has been coordinating the retrievals of crashed or landed non-human craft. That's the allegation that we're dealing with here. So this is multiple sources coming to us saying this. They're saying that the way this works is you have the CIA getting intelligence of these craft flying around somewhere. Maybe they've been brought down, maybe they've crashed, and this can be anywhere in the world. They then coordinate with special operations forces, and that can be under JSOC, that can be Delta Force, it can be SEAL teams. There's a range of different options there for the actual guys on the ground who are going to collect these things. They bring them back, and then it's the OGA, the Office of Global Access, that coordinates the handoff. They either give it to another government department or various government departments, or they give it to private industry, and that's the kind of Lockheed Martins of the world. We weren't told specifically that, particular things were given to Lockheed Martin, but we've had that indication from people like Harry Reid in the past, for example, former Senate Majority Leader, saying, hey, Lockheed Martin has some of these crash retrieved items. The detail then in the story was kind of the next step. We've got enough sources now telling us, the broad brushstrokes. And really, then it was a case of digging down into, okay, well, what can we find out about the OGA? And there's a fair amount out there in the public domain. There are records of, the number of directors that it has. The guy who helped found the organization in 2003, it seems to have been set up as a director, as an office in the Directorate of Science and Technology within the CIA. And we also helped build up a picture of the more mundane work that they do, or the more conventional work that they do. It's not just UFOs. The OGA, I found out through our research, through speaking to sources, that they actually go out and do retrievals, organized retrievals of other technology items, stuff that would be of value to the United States intelligence interests. So we're talking about, maybe it's a crashed satellite, maybe it's a stray nuke. They would be involved in getting access to places that are often denied to US military presence. So maybe that's behind enemy lines, maybe that's areas that are restricted, owned by adversaries, for example. And the OGA will help organize and get our people in there to retrieve that object, bring it back and exploit it. So that'll be analyze the technology or make the most of it.
Now, Chris, I understand from my discussions with sources too, that the Office of Global Access has agreements with friendly countries to be able to conduct operations such that if we need to go in at very short notice, it's not something that we have to go through the State Department. What can you elaborate on the Office of Global Access? This was a department I had never heard of before. And if you could answer that, and then also for you, Chris, what in this story and in your discussions with your sources, what did you find the most disturbing aspects of the story and the most interesting?
Sure, yeah. So obviously in terms of friendly countries, we've heard, for instance, from Canadian parliamentarian Ray Maguire, who's alleged that there's some kind of Five Eyes foreign materials retrieval program relating to UAP. So I found that really, really interesting. So I mean, I'm guessing that it's just easier for the OGA to kind of like work through Five Eyes to do that. And look, if this is all true, all these allegations are true, then that means other foreign governments and intelligence agencies are actually potentially working with the CIA on this, and that includes my own country as well. And I think like one disturbing aspect, which has kind of come across to me in recent weeks, is just how little oversight democratic officials really do have of defense and intelligence agencies. I mean, I was watching an interview of Dominic Cummings, the former advisor to Boris Johnson, the other week ago, and he was just saying that it's hardly ever done by ministers and secretaries of state where they actually know what's really going on, and it's actually with the permanent secretaries who aren't elected who hold the most of the power in terms of like the UK, and it seems that. Yeah, if this is all true, we're not just talking about some kind of significant conspiracy in the United States, which Congress is looking into right now, but also it involves other countries as well, allied countries. And it means that we could potentially have to see the same process occur in the UK, in Canada, New Zealand. I think that's something that's quite disturbing for me in terms of the lack of oversight into these intelligence So that's what really spoke out to me.
So, Josh, in the article here, we speak about that there is a system in place that can discern UFOs while they are cloaked, and that if the non-human craft landed, crashed, or brought down to Earth, and then, of course, when this happens, the special military units are sent to salvage the wreckage. What can you tell us about this system? My understanding is that this system is critical in order to generate these operations in very short notice to recover these things.
Yeah, so this is an area of the story where I would love to get more information. You know, we haven't fully fleshed out yet, at least in this particular story, you know, where exactly that intelligence comes from of, you know, oh, here's a UFO we've spotted, we're going to go get it. Here's a crashed one, or here's one flying around cloaked. But what we were told is that is some intelligence that the OGA receives. And it appears that it receives it from another agency, with another department within the CIA. So what we can deduce from that is we have the CIA having capability to spot these incredibly advanced craft that we know are not ours, and we know are not adversaries, not other countries, that are flying anywhere around the world. And that then they are able to dispatch a unit to collect that. This, it opens up a bunch of questions, right? It opens up questions about our satellite technology, because other people have told us, and in the process of putting together this story, you guys and I, spoke to a lot of people who didn't all make it into the article, and some of them told us different things. You'll hear that. The satellites that we use for Google Maps, for example, are not high enough fidelity to catch, small, relatively small objects like these craft flying around. But it begs the question: does the CIA or another government agency have very, very sophisticated satellites that we don't know about that are able to pick up these things? It also begs another question, right? This use of cloaked. I wanted to put that in the article. The source couldn't go into more detail about that. There are various restrictions that we're dealing with here, right? You've got classified material. You've got the fear of reprisal of these sources, which is why they're all anonymous as well in this story. You've got the potential that, if they give up too much information, that could identify them. So we're being kind of limited here, right? But what I did want to include was this phrase about them being cloaked. This tells us that, there is some kind of technology that these objects are using to avoid normal detection, but that there is some sophisticated technology that the CIA has in its possession that it can bring to bear to spot these things. Now, maybe this will point us in us, or at least Congress, in the right direction for tracking down these things, right? If we go to an agency that is using more prosaic technology, less sophisticated technology to look out for these things, just sort of normal weather satellites, that kind of thing, maybe we're not going to spot them. We'll spend years going through the data and say, oh, well, couldn't find anything. It's because we weren't looking in the right place. Maybe it's these more sophisticated classified systems, if they exist, that we need to be getting the data on, and that's where we will find, the evidence for these objects. That's what we're being told by sources, and really, this is up to the reader to kind of assess with us here, right? You've got in this story, we're bringing 3 anonymous sources with the central claims here of the CIA has this office that is heavily involved in non-human crash retrievals. But we're not telling you who they are, and we're giving relatively scant information. And so you kind of have to trust us to a certain extent. I mean, obviously we think that these sources have a good amount of credibility. Otherwise, I wouldn't be putting them in print. But there is this issue here where we're still fighting with this, this anonymity, trying to glean enough information without, getting people to violate any security oaths or anything like that. And until we have a breakthrough with Congress, with whistleblowers coming forward in public through these ways that they're allowed to do now, since we've had these various amendments in NDAA, for example, where you can have whistleblowers coming forward legally. it's going to be very difficult. And we're going to have these just anonymous sources with drip drabs of information that we're trying to all piece together, as you two are, as I am. And really, to get that breakthrough, we need this kind of legislation to open things up, at least in a manner that still protects the security of the American people and globally. If we're talking about other countries, we're talking about the UK, but allows people to understand the truth of the matter. Are there non-human craft flying around, crashing, landing? Do we have them in a bunker? Can we use these things to help humanity?
Josh, in your reaching out to your sources and the anonymity that had to occur, did your sources express why they could not go on the record about this and put their name to it?
Yeah, it was really those kind of three issues there. You've got the fear of and the desire not to violate security oaths. So this is, somebody who knows something that they can't say because, or if they can't say because it would be violating a security oath, and the small amount of information that they can give, would put them at risk. It's not technically violating a security oath. It's not giving up classified information, but it does put them in a position where, the government would come down on them like a ton of bricks. There would be investigations, their job might be, at risk. And so there's anonymity from that point of view. And we have that in many other areas of reporting on what the government does, what companies do. I'm doing that all the time when I'm doing other stories, and someone's speaking to me because they think the information needs to get out there, but they would be at risk. Their job, their livelihood would be at risk if they put their name and face to it. So you've got that issue. You also have the issue of identification. So if they are giving a certain amount of information, then it can be pinpointed as them. So they have to keep it fairly vague, or what they tell us we have to filter and then keep it a certain amount of vagueness, so that people trying to identify them can't sort of piece that together. And if you're doing that, there is a higher bar. Then you can't just have one person saying something and they're anonymous. You need multiple sources. Thankfully, working together with you guys, with the three of us, have managed to piece that together. And that was something that really struck me, actually, when doing this story. I went to my sources and took a bit of work to find the right people, but then, putting this specific information to them, talking about the OGA, Office of Global Access, what role does that have? It was suddenly like an aha moment of, oh, yes, they do know about that. And yes, this is something real. And we're onto something here. And I've had that experience before in previous stories. You kind of get a feeling for when you're onto something, when you've kind of hit the nail on the head. And that's what the feeling was with this story. So I'm hopeful that this is the first step in some progress, revealing more.
So Josh, so essentially it's not unusual in other areas as well in your journalism, and of course you've been doing this for a very long time, to come across sources that just can't go on the record. It's not strictly in the UAP field.
Yeah, that's true. I'll give you another example. I do a lot of work at the moment about the Biden family and the allegations of corruption there, Hunter Biden and his father. And, I've got people coming to me telling me things about that, if I just put their name out there, their job would be at risk, whether it's someone in law enforcement or another government department. They're telling me things that their employer wouldn't like them to tell me, but they feel are important for Americans to know. And so, I have to, at times, anonymize those people and limit the information that I publish that they've told me, in order to keep their safety, because that's my priority, but also try and get as much of that information out as possible if I manage to authenticate it and believe that it's true.
And Chris, you have had the same experience as well, correct?
Yeah. When it all pieces and fits together, that's one of the best moments when it comes to the story. So you're doing you're doing your research and stuff, and you're putting things together in your head about how things might work. And then when you start getting that corroboration and you know that you're onto something, that's something which is like, it's such a good feeling. But yeah, like, and also like, yeah, touch upon what Josh was saying as well about, you know, the sources wishing to remain anonymous. Look, as journalists, you know, we are the difference between someone, you know, being free and being with their family and potentially going to jail and facing significant repercussions. So, you know, we take that responsibility very, very seriously. And when we approached Josh with the story, you know, we could confirm to him that our sources that were speaking to us were very, very credible. But we couldn't even tell Josh who our sources were. So we had to say to Josh, we just said, look, you need to talk to your own sources and then try to get corroboration. If you're happy with it, if you're happy that your sources are telling you the same thing and you see them as credible, then I think that makes the story even more credible. It makes it stronger, and it kind of like backs us up as well. So yeah, that was my experience of it. And yeah, just again, I think Josh added so much to that story, and he did really take it to another level, especially getting the quotations and various details that we didn't have in our story when we provided the initial version to him.
Yeah,
well, thank you for that, Chris. I really appreciate it. And you know, but it was you two who you know, had the idea and brought the initial story to me. So you know, kudos to you guys. And just on that point of, you know, not telling me who the sources are. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you know, I have to treat it as you know, well, what if you know, what if this source who's speaking to you is lying, you know, or sources plural. You know, I've got to assure myself from my own sources that the story is true before we kind of proceed. And so I managed to do that, and then it can come together and we can, you know, really be confident about it. Of course, I did go through, you know, authentication and other means to verify what you were bringing to me. You know, it's not just a case of, oh, well, believe us. You know, it's there's a little bit more to it, of course, but readers will understand that.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important point to make, is that each one of us had our individual network of sources, and being able to corroborate a story of this magnitude, I think was significant. And I remember there was one source in particular that we spoke to, and all they would, I think the reply was, "How's the weather out there?" They wouldn't even respond. But I think by and large, almost all of them had something to add to this. Now, Chris, I want to circle back a little bit. Earlier, we were talking about the systems in place, and this, I'm veering a little bit off of the article, but I remember a long time ago, maybe about a year ago, you had come across a sensor fusion system in use by the government, or the Air Force, and I'm sure other elements as well, called Talon Thresher. And what I understand is that this is a multi-domain system that fuses various sensors from different domains. It's sort of like a flight-aware on steroids. And I know this is a little bit out of the scope of the article. Chris, do you think that could be a key in how these these vehicles are detected in real time, whether they're cloaked or not?
Yes. I think that definitely is a possibility. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. So when you talk to NORAD, for example, and they say, look, we don't have any records of anything unidentified tracks, as they call them, at that time when you know a UAP event happens, well, they don't keep those records. That is correct. It simply goes on to a system called Talon Thrasher.
That's right.
We don't keep records on UAP. That is correct, but they're not going to tell you about Talon Thrasher because that's a question to ask the DoD, whoever, and then the DoD will basically give you no information at all if you ask. So it's very, very interesting how they go about doing that. But yes, I think that definitely is a system that various intelligence personnel do use to analyze UAPs, let's say.
Yeah, I think that would be a good place for other journalists to dig. So, Josh, what did you learn about who in particular was sent out on these recovery operations? I think you had mentioned SEALs and some other operators. What did you find out from your sources?
So we had kind of a central, central part of the corroboration was a lot of people saying JSOC is involved, that the OGA sort of contracts this out to those special operations forces. So, and those are the units that, people in popular culture probably heard of: Delta Force, SEAL teams. It really depends on the situation, is what we were told. If you have a team in the area or near the area, those are the ones that you're going to use. It's about the practicalities of it. Who can you get to that location as soon as possible? Who has the capability? You've also got the questions of what are they specialized to do. You're not going to, I spoke to a former SEAL team member who was saying, look, you're not going to send your jungle warfare team to go and retrieve a nuke on the ice, around the Arctic. You're going to use the guys who are specialized for it, as long as you can get hold of them and they can get there in time. There were some other indications from some sources about units within the Department of Energy or linked to the Department of Energy. NEST was this unit that came up, which is this group that are specialized in retrieving stray nukes or anything that's got radiological elements to it. And that comes under the Department of Energy. Anything that has radioactivity in the kind of the legal language that set up what the Department of Energy's purview is, right? You've got this very broad language that says basically anything that's radioactive, it's our responsibility. But there was some contradiction. We put that in the article actually about whether NEST was involved or not. NEST itself denied it. They said that they haven't done anything involving UAP, and some we had a source who said that they could be involved in crash retrievals, but then another source said not. So I wanted to show readers that there was some conflicting reports and reports from our sources about who's involved in this, but the central core piece that we did seem to get a lot of corroboration on was those special operations forces. That's Delta, that's SEAL teams.
Chris, one of the stories, or one of the things that was related to both of us was a particular instance where a SEAL team was sent in to recover a crashed vehicle, and they initially thought it was probably some of our black tech, only to find out a little bit later that it was indeed from our neighbors, not from here. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to get across that, we shouldn't demonize these personnel that may be involved in these operations that may or may not be legal. They're simply doing their job, and especially when we're speaking about special operations forces. I mean, these guys, they risk their lives on a daily basis for their country and for the Western world in many instances as well. So I think it's very, very important to stress, firstly, that, if these allegations are true, that they're doing their jobs. And I think in a lot of cases, they don't realize what they may be involved in. But we did hear this, we did get this one story, and it kept on coming up from various sources about a SEAL team. Again, it was one of those cases that it just happened to be stationed in the right place at the right time to be involved with one of these retrieval programs. And it was stated to me that at first they thought it was some kind of Star Wars advanced technology, but then I believe from my understanding is that then some started thinking, well, actually this might not be, this might be something else, and a few of them got a little bit concerned that they were involved in something that might not be legal, So that was a story that I heard, but I know that Josh has got some more details on that story as well, which he put into the article. So Josh, I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
Oh, well, I don't know about details for that particular story. I mean, the challenge for me with that anecdote was that it came from a single source. And so we didn't go into detail of that story in the article. I mean, as fascinating as it is, I mean, I would love to know more about it. It's that on the ground knowledge potentially of, how these things work. This is potentially, are we talking about a SEAL team person who was actually involved in a crash retrieval? Those people who could speak directly to these kinds of operations, but we didn't have multiple sourcing on it. And so I just couldn't put it, in the article in detail and really, speak to that with authority. So what we did know, though, what we did learn from sources is that they will be sent out, often SEAL teams, for retrievals of things where they don't know what it is, the technology. And these are guys who are, pretty well versed in the kind of weapon systems that you might come across on the battlefield or, in their incredibly varied jobs. But they did not recognize them as enemy tech, as US tech, and that was quite surprising. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's out of this world tech, that it's alien, it's non-human, but it was something that these very experienced guys did not recognize. And that's happened multiple times. I've had that from multiple people, that is the case. But again, whether it was alien tech in those instances, I'm not sure. And I think, Chris, it's really a case of, can we get multiple sources for that story or other stories coming to us saying, hey, yeah, I was involved in the crash retrieval and so were my buddies and we're all going to tell you about it. That's kind of where we're trying to get to.
Right. I know one thing that was related to me was a concern that from these tier one operators that they understood that there was no top cover. So if this alleged incident did take place, there was concern that if they were called on the carpet, that no one would cover for them. Now, one bit that we discovered in our discussion with our sources is that the recovery operations are sort of done ad hoc. And what I mean by that is some are tasked to JSOC, but then other recovery operations are tasked strictly to a private aerospace company, or private defense contractor. So that defense contractor is solely responsible for sending in their tactical team or whatever you would like to call it to recover these things, which seems to me that it brings up all sorts of oversight questions. And Josh, I'm just curious, what is your feeling, or did you have any feedback from sources about the fact that this seems to be split between government operators, special operators, and special operators that are working directly for defense contractors without JSOC involvement in the operation?
Well, firstly, it rings true if you compare it to a more conventional operation. There are extraction teams, or like highly skilled paramilitary units that are private organizations. I'm thinking about companies like Blackwater, for example, who've been used in warfare and contracted to do the kind of jobs that special operations forces would otherwise do. So, there is precedent for this. The fact that it is a private company doing this crash retrieval and then maybe even also the analysis of it, the exploitation of that technology, according to what sources are telling us, that's potentially troubling because you don't have the same level of oversight. If it is a private company that owns this stuff, then according to the current legal situation, the government doesn't really have oversight over that. There's no audits that they can get their hands on. The company can use the shield of trade secrets to stop them, stop anybody actually discovering what they're working on, and that makes it a very murky situation. you've also then on top of that got all the levels of national security classification, etc. So it becomes really impossible to kind of dig into this stuff unless you have a whistleblower inside who comes out. Someone like on the private sector side doing what someone like David Grush has done, very courageously coming forward and talking about his experience. So I think that what it tells us is if this is happening, we need lawmakers to pass laws, amendments to make sure that we do have oversight over that, that we do, at least the American government, elected officials have oversight over those programs, because really this is not just some sort of interesting military tech that we might be able to make a few $1 million off of as a private company. This is the fact of potentially alien life, non-human advanced intelligent entities. I mean, that is something that I think, and Eric Burleson, when I spoke to him, the congressman, put this well. He said, the fact of that existing is something that the world deserves to know. Now, maybe all the details about how it works, how we got it, et cetera, that could remain classified or it could remain a trade secret. But the fact of, at least, I think should be public. And I think that it being run through private organizations is a barrier to that.
I completely agree. And we did really touch on it in the article, but one source shared that we'll say the more illegal, kinetic, retaliatory things were run by private contractors under the OGA umbrella. I'm sure it was kind of a method, if this is indeed true, to insulate the government and have the dirty work done by someone else, which really I think leads to the question not only for the United States but for to your government, to any democracy. How can you have a democracy if you have, let's just say, rogue element or a program that is purposely being run and operated in such a way to avoid oversight? Chris, how can a democracy survive in your country if let's say, something similar were structured and is indeed true?
Yeah, well, I once wrote a piece about UAPs being the frontier of democracy. And I think we're witnessing that right now with the drama involved with the Schumer amendment about UAP and having a review panel. It seems that for some reason, UAP and non-human intelligence, which aren't a real thing according to one Republican congressperson, believes that it's not a thing so much that he's prepared to go to the leader of the House and the minority Republican leader of the Senate to back him up on that, to get it removed from the NDAA, because there's really nothing into it. And I believe it that much that I'm gonna do this, and I happen to be the representative of Right Past an Airport as well, where these programs these craft are allegedly reverse engineered and body stored and stuff. I mean, that's just weird. I mean, as a journalist, you obviously want to look into that, because there's something sketchy about that. But yeah, I think it just goes to say what I was saying before, is that actually, yes, we do live in a democracy in writing, but if the people that we elect to power don't have oversight, then is it really a democracy if they don't have oversight? And I think that's really, really important, especially when you look at the history, especially of the CIA and MK Ultra and some of these other things. You had the Church Committee that was set up, which became the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I think it was the Pike Committee, which then became the House Intelligence Committee, and they both stem from intelligence abuses. Now it seems that the same thing is happening again, and these very things that were supposed to have oversight of the intelligence agencies don't really have oversight, that these intelligence agencies have managed to evade them, and that's why this is such a pressing issue. because take non-human technology and whatnot out of the equation, we've got various high-level intelligence people coming up to senators saying this stuff's real and it's being hidden and they're being lied to. It's a huge story. Like someone said before, either you've got high-ranking intelligence officials, who keep like the most sensitive secrets of the USA and brief the highest members of Congress and the president. Either they're all lying, they've all gone mad, or this is real. Whatever way you look at this is a huge, huge story.
I couldn't agree more. If Douglas Wolfe was one of the founders or was involved in getting the Office of Government Access up and running, I sure would love to know what he knows. I would imagine he knows quite a bit about all of this. Josh, what is your feeling about this in terms of how important is having government oversight of things like this to a healthy democracy?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical, right? You can't have a functioning democracy without knowing what the wings of government are doing, and sunshine is the best disinfectant. And if you've got dark corners where odd stuff is happening and our elected lawmakers don't know about it, then there's going to be corruption, there's going to be abuse there. It's open to that, at least, and especially when it's something as potentially as important as this. It's unconscionable that we aren't having that information shared. Now, I think Chris makes a good point saying, like, take out the whole non-human, alien, spooky UFO side of things. What are we being told here over and over again by very credible people, both anonymously and, on the record named? They're saying, we've got stuff that we don't know what it is, that is exhibiting incredible characteristics, flying around in the skies and the seas around us, and potentially space as well. We can't nearly match this stuff, and we may even have recovered some of it, and it's in a bunker somewhere. Whether it's enemies or a secret own US government program of human technology, but just like some super secret program that they're working on. I mean, either way, this is a huge thing that the intelligence and defense apparatus of our country needs to be getting to grips with and understanding, and the right hand needs to be talking to the left on it. But also, our lawmakers need to be having oversight over that, and they can't do their jobs properly if they don't know about it. If they're not being told that, what else aren't they being told? And if you don't have a proper understanding of what the executive is doing, then the legislature can't function. And I think that is just basic democracy as it is set up in the US.
I couldn't agree more. That's really what it boils down to. Well, Josh and Chris, I really appreciate. This was such a pleasure working with you both. And Chris, thank you for bringing me on board. And Josh, thank you for picking up this story and running it in the Daily Mail and really taking it to the next level. I think all of us had our individual talents, or brought our individual talents and networks to bear, which I think resulted in a really strong story. Guys, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to collaborating with both of you again down the road. Thanks for coming.